Good morning, students. Let us continue with the chapter number 14, ecosystem. Next topic, energy flow. Except for the deep sea hydrothermal ecosystem, sun is the only source of energy for all ecosystems on earth. Of the incident solar radiation, less than 50% of it is photosynthetically active radiation, that is PAR. We know that the plants and the photosynthetic bacteria autotrophs fix sun's radiant energy to make food from simple inorganic materials. Plants capture only 2 to 10% of the PAR, and thus a small amount of energy sustains the entire living world. So, it is very important to know how the solar energy captured by the plants flows through different organisms of an ecosystem. All organisms are dependent for their food on producers, either directly or indirectly. So, you find a unidirectional flow of energy from sun to producers and producer to consumers. If we remember the law of thermodynamics, the flow of energy is always unidirectional. Further, ecosystems are not exempt from the second law of the thermodynamics. They need a constant supply of energy to synthesize the molecules they require to counteract the universal tendency towards increasing disorderliness. The green plant in the ecosystem are called producers. In a terrestrial ecosystem, major producers are herbaceous and woody plants. Likewise, producers in aquatic ecosystem are various species like phytoplankton, algae, and other aquatic plants. You have read about the food chain and web that exist in nature. Starting from the plants, food chain or rather webs are formed such that an animal feeds on a plant or on other animal and in turn is food for another. The chain or web is formed because of this interdependency. Yes, food chain कैसे बनती है, एक दूसरे पे डिपेंड करता है और उस दूसरे पे कोई तीसरा डिपेंड करता है. अब जब किसी इंटरमीडिएट एनिमल पर एक से ज़्यादा लोग डिपेंड करते हैं तो वही फूड चेन, एक फूड चेन दूसरी फूड चेन से लिंक होती जाती है और बन जाता है फूड वेब. No energy is that is trapped into an organism remains in it forever. The energy trapped by the producer hence is either passed to the consumer or the organism dies. Death of an organism is the beginning of the detritus food chain or food web. All animals depend on plant directly or indirectly for their food needs. Hence, they are called consumers and also heterotrophs. If they feed on the producers, that is plants, they are called primary consumers. If the animals eat other animals which in turn eat the plants, then they are called secondary consumers. क्योंकि प्लांट हुए प्रोड्यूसर, उनको डायरेक्टली फीड करने वाले हुए प्राइमरी कंज्यूमर और उन प्राइमरी कंज्यूमर्स को फीड करने वाले हुए सेकेंडरी कंज्यूमर्स. Likewise, you could have tertiary consumers too. Obviously, primary consumers will be herbivores. Some common herbivores are insects, birds, and mammals, and in terrestrial ecosystem and mollusks in aquatic ecosystems. The consumers that feed on these herbivores are carnivores, or more correctly, primary carnivores. Though they are secondary consumers, but carnivores, they are first time they are eating animal. Those animals that depend on the primary carnivores for the food are labeled secondary carnivores. A simple grazing food chain is depicted here. Grazing food chain is GFC. Grass, goat, men. Grass is producer, goat is primary consumer or herbivore, man is secondary consumer or primary carnivore. While the detritus food chain, that is DFC, begins with the dead organic matter, it is made up of decomposers which are heterotrophic organisms, mainly fungi and bacteria. They meet their energy and nutrient requirements by degrading the dead organic matter known as detritus. These are also known as saprotrophs. Sapro means to decompose. Decomposers secrete digestive enzymes that break down dead and waste materials into simple inorganic materials which are subsequently absorbed by them. In an aquatic ecosystem, GFC is the major conduit of energy flow. As against this, in a terrestrial ecosystem, a much larger fraction of energy flow through the DFC, that is detritus food chain, than through GFC is there. Detritus food chain may be connected with the grazing food chain at some levels. Some of the organisms of DFC are prey to the GFC animals. And in natural ecosystem, some animals like cockroach, crows, etc. are omnivores. These natural interconnections of food chain makes the food web. Organisms occupy a place in the natural surrounding or in the community according to their feeding relationship with the other organisms. Based on the source of their nutrition or food, organisms occupy a specific place in the food chain that is known as their trophic level. Producers belong to the first trophic level, herbivores or primary consumer to the second, and carnivores secondary consumer to the third trophic level, as shown in the figure. We can see here primary producer, first trophic level, plants, phytoplankton, grass or trees. Primary consumer, second trophic level, herbivores, zooplankton, grasshopper or cow. Secondary consumer, third trophic level, carnivores, bird, fish, wolf. Tertiary consumer, fourth trophic level, top carnivores, man, lion. The important point to note is that the amount of energy decreases at successive trophic levels. When any organism dies, it is converted to detritus or dead biomass that serves as an energy source for decomposers. Organisms at each trophic level depend on those at a lower trophic level for their energy demands. Each trophic level has a certain mass of living material at a particular time called as standing crop. The standing crop is measured as the mass of living organism, biomass, or the number in a unit area. The biomass of a species is expressed in terms of fresh or dry weight. Measurement of biomass in terms of dry weight is more accurate. Why? The number of trophic level in a grazing food chain is restricted as the transfer of energy follows 10% law. Only 10% of the energy is transferred to each trophic level from the lower trophic level. In nature, it is possible to have so many levels, producer, herbivore, primary carnivore, secondary carnivore in the grazing food chain. Let us see in the figure 14.3. Percent of energy is dissipated or released at each trophic level, right from the sun to the last trophic level. Whole food chain. At each step we can see that the energy is released in the form of heat. Ecological pyramids. You must be familiar with the shape of a pyramid. The base of the pyramid is broad and it narrows towards the apex. One can get similar shape whether you express the food or energy relationship between the organisms at each trophic level. This relationship is expressed in terms of number, biomass or energy. The base of each pyramid represents the producers or the first trophic level, while the apex represents the tertiary or the top level consumers. The three types of ecological pyramids that are usually studied are pyramid of number, in which number of organisms is counted, pyramid of biomass, in which dry weight or wet weight is considered, pyramid of energy, in which energy flow is considered. Let us see the figure in more detail. The base consists of primary producers. Numbers are 5,842,000, while primary consumers are 708,000, while secondary consumers are 354,000, while tertiary consumers are only 3. Here an example is given of the grassland ecosystem in which only 3 top carnivores are there. Similarly, we will see the next pyramid, pyramid of biomass, in which the first trophic level has the dry weight in kg per meter square 809, second 37, third 11 and fourth 1.5. Here example is given of a ecosystem in which a sharp decrease in biomass at the higher trophic level is seen. Here an inverted pyramid is given in which primary producers have only 4 kg per meter square while primary consumer is 21 kg per meter square. It is seen in the case of standing crop of phytoplankton which supports a large standing crop of zooplankton. So here a pyramid of biomass which is inverted is also shown. So this can also be the case. It is not required that every time the pyramid would be erect. It can be inverted also. Here an ideal pyramid of energy is given in which we have observed that primary producers convert only 1% of the energy to the sunlight available to them into the net primary produce. 10,000 joules becomes 1,000 at the second trophic level, becomes 100 at the third and becomes 10 at the fourth trophic level. Any calculations of energy content, biomass, or number has to include all living organisms at that trophic level. No generalizations we make will be true if we take only few individuals at any trophic level into account. Also, a given organism may occupy more than one trophic level simultaneously. One must remember that the trophic level represents a functional level, not an species. As such, a given species may occupy more than one trophic level in the same ecosystem at the same time. For example, a sparrow is a primary consumer when it eats seeds, fruits, peas, and a secondary consumer when it eats insects and worms. In most ecosystems, all the pyramids of number of energy and biomass are upright. That is, producers are more in number and biomass than the herbivores, and herbivores are more in number and biomass than the carnivores. Also, energy at a lower trophic level is always more than the higher level. There are exceptions to this generalization. If you were to count the number of insects feeding on a big tree, what kind of pyramid do you get? Now add and estimate the number of small birds depending on the insects, as also the number of larger birds eating the smaller. The pyramid of biomass in sea is generally inverted because the biomass of fishes far exceed that of phytoplankton. Pyramid of energy is always upright, can never be inverted. Underline this sentence. Because when energy flows from one trophic level to next, always some energy is lost in the form of heat at each step. Each bar is the energy pyramid, indicates the amount of energy present at each trophic level in the given time or annually per unit area. However, there are certain limitations of ecological pyramid, such as it does not take into account the same species belonging to two or more trophic levels. It assumes a simple food chain, something that almost never exists in nature. It does not accommodate a food web. जबकि फूड वेब इज मस्ट, कभी भी कोई भी चेन सिंगल हो ही नहीं सकती. Moreover, saprophytes are not given any space in the ecological pyramids, even though they play a very important role in the ecosystem.